It is 10 minutes after 2, and we're ready to begin the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'd ask the members of the committee to please report to the meeting room so that we can begin. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this hearing of the Budget and Finance Committee for Monday, January 28th, 2013. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Paul Kretz and Councilmember Bill Rosendahl, and we're ready to begin. We'll begin first with general public comment. If anybody would like to present general public comment on an area within the jurisdiction of the committee, please bring forward a white card. Seeing none, general public comment is closed. That brings us to our closed session item first, but before we begin that, members, I would like to propose, with your consent, I would like to propose items 7, 9, and 10 as consent candidates for approval.
So moved.
And in addition, item number 6, there is, I understand, no one from the pension funds here right now to discuss that matter, but as far as I'm concerned, it could advance as a consent candidate as well, unless either of you have an objection to that.
No, I'm
No objection.
delighted to see it move forward.
I thought that would be the unanimous feeling, so why don't we go ahead and approve then items 6, 7, 9, and 10 on consent. And that will be the action of the committee. So, okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and, without objection, members, because we did just have a couple of folks in who wanted to speak on general public comment, I'm going to reopen general public comment without objection. And receive those cards now, and then at the conclusion of public comment, we'll go to closed session. And so I have one card for Roy Stone, who I'd like to ask to come forward. Is there anybody else who's filling out a card?
Yes.
Okay, so we have one other speaker then following Mr. Stone. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I thought we were going to be right on time, but I appreciate this extra moment and your consideration. And what we're here to talk about today is that we have a serious issue in the Los Angeles Public Library. As you all know, and probably all voted with the public and us, of course, on March 8th of 2011 to support Measure L, to support the library, to support renewed hours, renewed services, and renewed hiring. But as you are all aware, there's a managed non-hiring committee, and they have gotten in the way of hiring any extra staff. The very first additional staffing starts today with 22 half-time librarians, no clerical staff. This is with over 300 vacant positions that were cut over the time period of the early retirement, over the layoffs and the firings, and we get 22 half-time librarians. This is the libraries in your communities, which are some of the busiest libraries in our system, and they're trying to make do and provide for service. The library department is helpless because they request hiring, managed hiring, to non-elected officials, as you know, the CLA, the CAO, and the mayor, and they have refused. We started additional hours October 15th. No one new has started until today. So we're here asking you, as our elected officials, to support the people who voted along with you, to support your libraries, and to do whatever you can to say to manage hiring, this isn't working. This is a real problem. The Measure L funds are there. We're not asking for additional money. We're asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next and final speaker is Henry Gamble. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for us coming in on very late notice. My name is Henry Gamble, and I will give a quick background. I've spent 13 years before I was a librarian. I was at Pepperdine University. I taught English and composition. I was also appointed the Director of Educational Assessment when which looks into educational effectiveness. When I first started as a librarian, I was a YA, young adult librarian, for many, many years. I only bring that up not to tender my resume, to say that I've worked in promoting literacy and education throughout my entire adult career. And when I see unnecessary obstructions to our citizens' literacy, it's deeply disappointing for me. We're starting to call the Managed Hiring Committee the Managed Non-Hiring Committee. Not to be disrespectful, because that's systematically what's happening. When we get an approved list of people to be hired, and because of Measure L, we have the money to hire these people. And we keep getting things back from the non-hiring committee saying it's on hold. Can't you get anyone to transfer in? You couldn't. It's on hold again. We're thinking about it. We hear that they have to have consensus on it in order to make a decision, and we really feel that they're just picking one person each month to be the naysayer so that this circus can keep going on. In the meantime, we can't serve the public like we're supposed to. I would like to teach more computer classes as a professional to people, to the veterans that come into the Brentwood branch where I'm branch manager. I don't have the time because I don't have enough clerical support staff because the Managed Non-Hiring Committee keeps running with this plan. So this is just the beginning of us saying, please help us on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to, if I could, point of order with the gentleman. You're my guy from the Palisades, right?
That was, yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciated who you were in that. I just wanted to thank you.
All right. And that concludes then our general public comment. And we will move now to our closed session item number 1. Is there anybody who wishes to offer public comment on item number 1? Seeing none, public comment on that closed session item is now closed, and we will go ahead and take closed session in here. So if you're not here on item number 1, I'd like to ask you to step out, please, for a few moments while we discuss that. Next on the agenda will be item number 2 and 3, which I'd like to hear together, please.
Yep. So item 2 was continued from our January 14th, 2013 meeting. It is Fire Department report relative to the status of the department's fiscal year 12-13 budget, including the sworn content staffing overtime account, the department's efforts to switch the fire dispatch center staffing to a 540 work schedule, and efforts to seek reimbursements for ambulance transport costs under AB 678. Item 3 is adopted budget recommendation instructing the CAO to monitor revenue received from federal reimbursement of EMS ambulance services through AB 678 and report in the mid-year financial status report with the actual amount received and updated revenue projections.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jim Gibson with the Fire Department.
Fernando Campos, Inspector General with the Office of the CAO.
I'll start with the weekly update. There really are no significant changes to report on the constant staffing overtime account and the status of negotiations with UFLAC for switching to the 540 schedule. So my update will focus on AB 678. At the last meeting, I reported that the state and CMS were going to be meeting on January 18th. That meeting did occur, and we're pleased to report that the meeting was very, very positive. The state was able to answer all the questions that CMS had on the remaining outstanding issues relative to the cost report and methodology. The next step is for the CMS to report back. We're hoping that the report back will occur within 3 to 4 weeks, and that report back will provide the final approval for the cost methodology and any modifications that they want the beta group to make. Once we receive final approval, the city, as well as the rest of the beta group, will be able to make the modifications to the final report probably within about a week. That report will then go back to the state. We're trying to arrange a meeting with the state to establish a accurate timeline as to what the reimbursement schedule may be after they receive the final reports from the beta group. And
Who within state government would you need to meet
the
with?
Department of Healthcare Services would be processing the payment through the controller's office. Based on prior conversations we have had with the state, it's our understanding that once the cost reports are submitted to them, that the processing time takes about 60 days or so. There was also a concern, I think it was a concern that was raised by the Inspector General with respect to the payment process and whether or not the reimbursement had to wait for the federal government to provide payment to the state. That, in fact, is not how it works. The controller does the drawdown from the Medicare account, and simultaneous to the drawdown from that account, it's almost an automatic electronic link to CMS, and the electronic transfer is made from CMS directly into the state account. So that obviously is beneficial because, it avoids further delays. We also raised the question with CMS with respect to sequestration. We got clarification that the pending reimbursement application is not impacted by sequestration.
Great.
So the anticipated $23 million will not be impacted by that. With respect to future reimbursements, CMS obviously, is unclear on that point. So we're just going to have to wait until that process is finalized by the federal government.
Great. Colleagues, Mr. Kretz.
Yeah, I think the last time this issue came before us, Mr. Englander had a question about whether the ratepayer advocate had reviewed the fire department being reimbursed by the DWP for some of the services. Has that taken place? Do we have any information on that?
No, the ratepayer advocate has not weighed in. We don't believe that it would be appropriate for the ratepayer advocate to weigh in until such time as we've finalized the protocol as to how we were going to be submitting our invoices to Water and Power. We had another discussion with the Water and Power attorney last week, as well as further discussions with the chief financial officer. So we're working through the details of that, and at the point in time that the protocol is finalized and the city attorney renders its legal memo, the appropriate documentation will work with the CAO's office to interface with the ratepayer advocate to provide input from him.
Any idea what the timeline's likely to be till we get to that point?
We're obviously trying to do that as quickly as possible. We're reviewing the data contained in our CAD system and trying to pull out information for the previous 3 years, as well as analyzing the data that we have retroactive to July 1st to get a sense as to the length of time on average that it takes for water and power crews to wait for, for fire crews to wait for water and power crews to arrive on scene.
So no sense of how long that's going to take, a couple months, a month?
We're hoping that we can do that, within the next 3 weeks or so.
Great, thank you.
On that one point, Mr. Rosendahl, if I may, it's also important to note that the ratepayer advocate was intentionally set up as an independent office that isn't subject to direction by the council, nor the DWP, nor the CAO. So if the ratepayer advocate feels that it's material for the ratepayer advocate to weigh in on this, then that's up to the ratepayer advocate, but it's not up to us or the department to ensure that happens. And clearly, I think the ratepayer advocate has no business making policy. You can certainly comment on impacts on rates, but as to whether or not it's a good policy decision, it's none of his business, frankly. It's our business. So That's my 2 cents on that point. Mr. Rosendahl.
Yeah, I got a series of questions, and based on that, I'll know where I'm at. What is the current deficit the fire department is looking at for the current fiscal year?
What we're reporting in the second financial status report is we're anticipating 1.3 million, and the 1.3 million is based on our inability to be able to implement the 540 schedule in February, which is what we were hoping would occur. But obviously, because of negotiations, that is not going to occur. And obviously, if the reimbursement from water and power doesn't come to pass, then that will also be added to our deficit.
Is the department still on track to cover the $3 million deficit in the constant staffing overtime account?
Well, the $3 million deficit in the constant staffing overtime was part of the $5.2 million overall deficit that was reported by the CAO in the first financial status report. And we were instructed to provide a roadmap as to how we were going to try to balance the budget at year end, and the $3 million from water and power was part of the addressing that shortfall. And as I indicated, if we don't get that amount, then that will be added to our deficit.
Has the department received the reimbursements from the 405 freeway work and the roughly $300,000 for wildfire deployment out of the city in July and August of last year?
Sal Martinez from our budget group is coming up and responding to that.
Good afternoon.
Commissioners. We have our applications in on both those, but we have not yet received our reimbursement. We do anticipate them coming in before the end of the fiscal year.
Great, okay. With the understanding that the 540 work schedule at the Fire Dispatch Center is now a meet and confirm matter in the EERC, is the $1.3 million that has been anticipated as savings going to be covered?
We are not going to realize those savings, no, sir.
We are not.
No, sir.
Okay. I brought this up during the city budget hearings before, but as far as revenue generation, we don't collect in ambulance transports from the county jail, yet the city is paying the county $3 million annually for arrestee transports from the LAPD jail facilities. Has the fire department explored the feasibility of charging the county a fee to transport inmates via ambulance? Gold in the gutter, what I call it.
By current ordinance, Councilman, we are prohibited from charging it. It's one of the exemptions that was put in the ordinance. We certainly could pursue what the revenue generated would be if we went and looked in that, but at this point we have not.
Well, the reason I say it is, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. The county is this and we're that, and if we're doing them a favor, they should be picking up the tabs and stuff like that. So I would officially like to have you ask them how we work that out, and they should be obligated to do it. If you think you can, it's worth the effort, anyhow, to look into it. Okay, for item number 3. I understand that the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, has a few outstanding questions about cost methodologies. What specific questions are outstanding?
To tell you the truth, we were not allowed to participate in that meeting, and that was specifically at the request of CMS. The information and feedback that we received came directly from the state. CMS only wanted to meet with the auditors of the state, because it's the auditors of the state that are actually going to be reviewing the cost reports. My understanding is that their concern was focused on the cost components.
I got 2 more questions. Can we still count on receiving this AB 678 money during this fiscal year, and are we still looking at $23.5 million?
We're extremely optimistic that we will be receiving the $23 million this fiscal year.
Great, that's a nice one to hear.
And if I can add to that, Fernando Campos, Inspector General, we do remain optimistic in terms of receiving the funds this fiscal year. In the first quarter financial status report, I did indicate the December deadline for an ideal time period or milestone for us to receive approvals. We did submit the report, and I believe the fire department and the Beta Group did a great job in getting it into the state and also into the federal agency's review queue. As Ms. Gibson indicated, that all the questions were answered and feedback was provided. We are now in a wait-and-see period about 3 to 4 weeks before we receive notification from the federal government. But the feds do reserve the right to take up to 90 days for review of that approval. We don't anticipate that will be the case. We remain optimistic that it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks before we receive that approval. In terms of receiving it, currently, as long as we receive the approval by the end of February, early March, I remain optimistic that we will receive the funds this fiscal year. However, after March, I am indicating in the upcoming mid-year financial report that the city should remain cautiously optimistic at that point. So it's the likelihood to receive does go down, but it's not going to be at zero.
Fair enough on that. How much of this is one-time revenue, and how much can we count on an ongoing revenue basis?
We're estimating that the ongoing revenue will be around $10 million.
$2 million. And what impact could federal sequestration have on receiving this revenue?
As I indicated, CMS themselves don't know how sequestration is going to impact the revenue received. So it's kind of a wait-and-see situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kretz, anything further? All right, thank you. So what we'll do is, with your agreement, colleagues, we'll continue item number 2 until the next reporting period in this committee. As to item number 3, I'd propose that we approve the instruction to the CAO and instruct the CAO to aid the fire department in whatever ways possible to seek the reimbursements under AB 678.
Yep.
And
Great.
And most certainly we'll have an update in our mid-year in the next 2 weeks.
very good. That'll be the action of the committee. Thank you very much. And Mr. Serrano, that brings us to item number 4.
Yes, item 4 is a controller report relative to an update on ex-CRA tax increment monies received by the city and a description of how these monies were recorded.
Good afternoon, Matthias Farfan for the Office of the Controller. Before you is correspondence from the Controller. It's a follow-up correspondence from the one dated October 10th of 2012. It simply just provides information on monies being received as a result of the CRA going away. Up to last month, we were receiving disbursements from the state out of a fund that was titled Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund, but we recently received a disbursement related to the ex-CRA, which came from another fund, which is titled the Low and Moderate Income Housing Fund. And this is just reporting that we've received the funds and we've posted them to the general fund under the ex-CRA tax increment monies revenue source line item. And again, it's just simply to keep you up to date on the monies being received and where they're being placed. And they'll keep on being placed there unless a policy change is made.
Into the general fund?
Into the general fund, yes.
And if there were a policy change that were made along those lines, because much more than this amount has already been budgeted, it would have a detrimental impact on our year-end balance,
That is correct. The line item that's been budgeted in the current year budget from ex-CRA tax increment monies is $48.6 million.
Okay. And so what's this amount that was received in January is $9 million towards that. We still have a ways to go. But if that were to be reallocated to any other purpose other than general fund, then we would have to make up for that amount of money someplace else.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Kretz.
So how much have we brought in this year, and are we on pace to hitting the $48.6 million?
For the current fiscal year of the 48.6 million, including this dollar amount, we've posted 43.6 million of that. So we're 5 million out from what we've read regarding this. We should receive an estimate sometime in April on what the June payment, so we are expecting one last disbursement in XCRA monies. We don't know the dollar amount. The county is supposed to provide us an estimate in April.
Do we think it's likely that we hit the missing $5 million?
It's likely we will. It's all dependent on how quickly the CRA winds down. Of course, the disbursements made to the the former CRA, the successor agency, and the less money they need for a particular time period, the more money we in the schools and others get.
So what's your sense when it'll be all over, time-wise?
Well, that I couldn't speak to. As far as how long it'll take to wind down the CRA, that all depends on the committee that's, who's administering that. I know the city's decided to take on the housing function from the former CRA, but as far as the other functions, I know the CLA and the CL have been reporting to your body regularly on what the status is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you. So we'll note and file
Note and file.
report. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 5.
Item number 5. Item 5 is Office of Finance report relative to an escheatment of $815,000 from the unclaimed money seized incidental to arrest fund number 7772 to the city general fund.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Jan
Good afternoon.
Zatorsky, Assistant Director of Finance with the Office of Finance, and with me is a representative from the Los Angeles Police Department, Ms. Shufan Wei. And this is, as you know, an escheatment. The LAPD makes a request to Office of Finance, and in accordance with state law, we post advertisements, and this is relative to the unclaimed monies seized incidental to arrest trust fund. And so at the time we submitted the report on January 15th, we had an amount of $815,000, and the city clerk just passed out a new update. We did receive another claim for $3,000 since the date of that report. And so I just want to go on the record and correct the amount that should be escheated as $812,048.19.
Thank you, Mr. Kretz.
What exactly happens to the money? Does it just go into the general fund, or does it go into the general fund earmarked for the LAPD? How's this work?
No, I believe it just goes into the general fund as a revenue item.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the 3 million, what is it, 3,370, do you see any additional at this point?
I'm sorry?
Do you see any additional claims coming?
No, we try to process them as soon as they come in, and that is the latest one we have for dispatch that's going through right now. There
Okay.
isn't any pending.
Thank you. That's it.
But just so I'm clear, though, once the escheatment takes place, any other claim against it would be delinquent at that point, right? Is there any risk that there would be claims against money that have already been escheated that we would then have to reimburse out of the general fund?
It has happened. Once the money is escheated to the general fund and the claim comes in requesting for refund, we still process it. It that comes out of the general fund, the revenue source for escheatment.
Isn't there some statute of limitations provided under the state law for when that claim? Wow, okay. But if they haven't claimed it after 3 years, there's probably a pretty good chance that they're not going to, I guess, so. Okay.
Correct.
The risk is pretty low.
What's that?
The risk is pretty low, yeah.
Okay, anything further on this, colleagues? So then I would recommend that we approve the item as amended with the $3,000 and some reduction to reduce the amount by the current claim on the fund. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, without objection, that's the action of the committee. Thank you very much.
And the
We've
last,
already dealt with item number 6. That brings us to item number 8, which I can't for the life of me understand why we didn't deal with on consent, but It's always nice to hear about computers going to elementary schools, so if anybody would like to speak to that. But if not, it will be the suggestion that we approve the report and help the kids at Ricardo Lizarraga Elementary School with 5 surplus computers.
Can I object? Don't give kids computers. What a terrible idea. No, move the item.
Without objection, that will be the
So
act of the
moved, yes.
committee, and that completes our business. We are adjourned.